Hello, School Transportation Nation. Tony Corpin here. We're glad you made it to the podcast. It's brought to you by TransFinder, the leader in school bus routing software, and by School Radio, your source for reliable radio communications. In just a little bit, our senior editor, Taylor Ekbatani, is going to be speaking with Joshua Collins, Transportation Director for Peoria Public Schools District 150 in Illinois. Their superintendent, Dr. Sharon Desmoulin-Kherat, is a finalist for the AASA Superintendent of the Year Award, which we're doing a lot of coverage over on the stnonline.com website. Go check that out. There's some great stories there of the finalists, and you can learn all about them. Mr. Ryan Gray is also joining me to talk about the top headlines. Ryan, welcome, sir.
Thank you very much. And again, it's always a pleasure to be with the nation.
All right, so let's dive in, Ryan. We got a lot going on in the headlines. We got immigration. The U.S. Department of Education is under fire. There's lots of talk out there about what's going to happen with the Trump administration, kind of breaking that down. What's it all mean for school transportation? Man, there's a lot to digest here. So before we get to that, we got a quick message. Hey guys, what do software, hardware, and safety have in common? One word: TransFinder. At the STN Expo in Reno, TransFinder won 3 Innovation Choice Awards, voted on by STN Expo attendees for best software, best hardware, best safety technology. TransFinder's Route Finder plus routing solution and apps, Stop Finder and Wayfinder, are well known in the industry. Not everyone realizes TransFinder provides hardware like card readers, tablets, and mounts. And as for safety, Patrol Finder for schools is TransFinder's latest solution designed to make buses and campuses safer. TransFinder's president and CEO, Antonio Civitella, said the recognition means so much because it's voted on by STN Expo attendees. Civitella said, "We know a lot is riding on TransFinder because a lot is riding on those yellow buses that travel through our communities. TransFinder must continue to innovate as more is being expected of transportation departments from district leadership as well as parents." Learn more at transfinder.com. That's transfinder.com. All right, Ryan, we're back. Let's talk. What's on your mind, Ryan, with these stories?
What's on my mind? Well, where to start? There's a lot going on, as you said, and one of the big things that a lot of our readers are very tuned into right now is what are these tariffs going to mean to their operations? So we definitely learned last week, actually a couple weeks ago, from Bluebird. There was a story up last week on stnonline.com that I wrote about where Phil Horlock, now the retired president and CEO of Bluebird, John Wiskill, took over for him this week, actually. And Phil was saying that all internal combustion engine school buses, if the tariffs go through with Mexico and Canada, and we know there's other tariffs at play potentially. We know that there's a tariff in play right now with China, 10%. But he was really alluding to if in the next few weeks the tariffs go into effect with Canada and Mexico, that there will be a 5% increase on those ICE buses, so a 5% price increase. Now, the other OEMs we have not heard yet, although I know Thomas Built Buses, I talked to them, and they are pointing to statements the American Trucking Associations have made about the larger trucking industry, that the price increases could be up to $35,000. Now, that would be for probably your big rig trucks. So, but it gives a range, maybe half that for or less than that for school buses. Again, a lot to be determined. Interestingly enough, knowing that little tidbit of information, we went to our readers to find out what their thoughts were. And we really asked them, in terms of products and services, but really products, because there's a lot of steel, for example. And, last couple weeks ago or last week, President Trump came out and said that he was going to re-implement tariffs on steel. Of course, we saw that back in 2018.
Aluminum as well, too, right?
And aluminum. And we know that both of those go into school buses. And so it's really opening up to different countries. But we've seen that in the past. So it's nothing new, but certainly it's going to send a jolt into the market. And we asked folks, do they think that prices are going to increase for what they're purchasing? And we know, again, whether it be a school bus or camera system or whatever, there's steel and aluminum in a lot of things. And just shy of 50% said yes. Just shy of 40% said no. And just shy of about 11 or 10.5% or so said they weren't sure. And what's interesting about that, Tony, is, this survey is not just going out to school districts and school bus contractors. We have vendors responding to this. We have manufacturers responding to this, and we're looking at the responses, and we're not going to name any names, but we're seeing some vendors, a lot of vendors actually saying yes, they think that tariffs are going to go up.
I 100% agree. I think that if anyone thinks that tariffs aren't going to drive the cost of products up, they're mistaken, right? And tariffs basically, as you hear them, what is a tariff, right? A manufacturer makes a product in another country, ships it into the United States, and whoever buys that product or ingests that product has to pay a tax, right? Whatever that is, 25%, they pay it right on. Before the product is even sold, manufactured, right? When they receive it, they have to pay that 25% of the value of that product that was purchased. It's a tax. And, this was done many, many years ago in the United States, but here it is again. So we'll see. Just like when our products are shipped overseas, we have to pay a tax, or the buyer of that product. That's why there's a lot of tug of war going on with why U.S. cars aren't sold in Europe, or why China ships so much stuff to the United States. I was hearing a government official in Mexico talk about how much in terms of products are shipped into the United States or Mexico. It was like $700 billion they were talking about, as it's such a heavy manufacturing, based country, that if Trump drops a 25% tariff on everything they're sending in, do the quick math, 700 billion, 25%, it's a big number. So they think that it's going to cause unemployment. There's a lot of things. So there's implications of President Trump ripping down the North American Free Trade Agreement. And that potentially can send ripples through manufacturers. And then, we talked about this, Ryan. It's like getting the supply chain stable and everything's back on track. And then all of a sudden, bam, what is this going to mean? And I think, again, it's a lot of political posturing, negotiations. But I think the reality is tariffs are coming, right? He paused the 25% tariff on everything to increase border security and immigration policies, things of that nature. But here we are. Now it's like, well, I'm going to put a tariff on aluminum and steel. What else is to come? We just don't know. So it's such a wild card, and it's such a fluid situation that it's going to be difficult for, I think, school transportation operators to budget exactly what the impact is to them. But I think the reality is, as Phil Horlock said, there's going to be a price increase. What it is, it's to be determined. He says 5%, Thomas goes with what the American Trucking Association says, which I'm not sure how much a heavy duty truck costs, but if you say it's 600,000, 500,000, that's somewhere in that kind of 5 to 7% range, I guess, if we're just taking a quick guess at it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And you're right. Razvan Radulescu, who's the CFO of Bluebird, in that call, he said, think of this as essentially a sales tax imposed by the federal government. So it is that, and granted, their tariffs are at play in a lot of places and have been. It's just, I think, the scale of them that has people rocked a little bit. And you had mentioned the North American Free Trade Agreement. Now, that actually was replaced back in 2020 by the U.S. Mexico-Canada Agreement. So that's really what this is looking to add these tariffs to. And I was reading an interesting article the other day from an economist, Peter Morisi, who said essentially, he thinks that instead the U.S., Mexico, and Canada should combine and really put more pressure on China, because we've seen China just, their shares globally just increase over the last, many years. But that aside, certainly, we're looking at some price increases. And, at the same time, Tony, we also have this EPA Clean School Bus program in limbo. Last that I had heard, basically before we were going in to record this podcast, was the portal for the Clean School Bus program still being offline or not allowing people to log in. Now, that comes despite a memo that Politico actually got a hold of. It was an internal memo from Greg Tremmel, who is the EPO CFO. And this was just prior to the Bluebird first quarter 25 fiscal call, and Phil Horlock broke the news on the webcast that he said, "Hey, funding for federal programs that are under IIJA, Investing in Infrastructure and Jobs Act," which the Clean School Bus program that was created under that act, and then IRA, the Inflation Reduction Act, which we see some of the incentives like 45W for the property tax incentive for setting up electric charging stations and whatnot, that those are protected. Now, we know that there's a federal court order that froze a lot of the Trump administration freezing pauses on all of these federal programs. But still, we're hearing from folks. In fact, I was on a call last week with a lot of electric school bus providers, school districts, and whatnot, and they were saying, yeah, they could not log into this portal to get their money, so they're wondering when this money is going to open up. So we have that going on as well, and we have open POs, Tony, that a lot of school districts are trying to figure out, can we get out of those? And we see that at the same time, we've talked about Lion Electric School Bus and their auction process that's ongoing, and folks trying to figure out what to do with those POs. So yeah, it's definitely has a lot of folks scrambling right now.
I know the NSTA, the National School Transportation Association, has a bus in to Capitol Hill where they're going to talk to congressional leaders. That's the day after STN Expo East that they begin that trudge on March 26th. So we'll see also what happens there. I'm sure they definitely are hyper-focused on getting this funding back on track. So we'll wait to hear a little more from them. I know they were all waiting to see when the new EPA administrator was kind of chosen.
He's in.
Yeah, now he is, right? And now it's time to get after it and start talking to these different groups about what's going to happen, because it's just moving so quick day by day. There are new headlines coming out with DOGE finding spending through all these government agencies. And again, I think to the point of this EPA CFO, these programs were laws, right? This stuff was approved. This is not some boondoggle. It's going to school buses for children. I mean, I don't see this as being some odd expenditure that no one's managing with no oversight. There's oversight on these programs. And, the EPA has had their hands in this program. It has been evolving and evolving and evolving. Some people think it's too much oversight in the program, that it's kind of de-evolved a bit. But regardless, what about the applications that were just put in that January deadline, that late January? So people are like, I just applied. I took all this time to apply. What's this mean? So I can imagine that entire process is simply frozen for the time being. Hopefully it thaws out quick, so people can plan accordingly. But it's going to be real hard for student transportation operations to plan with this kind of unknown, this limbo that's happening.
Yeah, well, and keep in mind too, now there have been oversight reports on Clean School Bus to show inefficiencies. We've reported on that a couple times over the years. So specifically for a Clean School Bus program, and we've known about those, and I think EPA has addressed many of those. But I think to the point of, like you mentioned, DOGE, and it's uncovering a lot of really crazy expenditures. And, I think that where the industry comes back, and Phil Horlock mentioned this in the call a couple weeks ago, their financial call, that, this is an opportunity to, again, tell the great American school bus story. And from a Bluebird standpoint, of course, they are really the only, or one of the, in terms of the big buses, the only, private or in America company that's not a part of a more of a global outfit. And so I think that, industry wide, that's the story that needs to be told, is the Great American School Bus story. It's for the kids. And certainly, in this current environment of looking at cutting programs or making things more efficient, certainly, when it comes to the kids, and there's a lot of other things that are going to be potentially cut. And you mentioned Department of Education and the potential impact on IDEA, Title I. There's other things afoot with Medicaid and whatnot. So certainly, yeah, there is a lot that needs to be figured out. And you mentioned, Tony, the lobbying effort that NSTA is going to be undertaking with their bus in. That's already underway in a lot of different areas, and I'm trying to get some clarification on these things. But I've heard from several sources that there's several lobbying efforts afoot. I know that, I've heard a lot of names bandied about. So we know that there's a lot of school bus industry that's involved right now. They're talking to their congressional representatives. They're talking to folks in Congress. Phil Horlock mentioned again in that call that they've been talking to folks and getting support solidified for Clean School Bus in Congress, that there is support for it. So I think, and with any new administration, certainly we see some pauses on programs, especially in the past. We've seen it on new proposed rules when they take a second to look at it and look at the implications. We haven't seen it quite to this level, but as we move forward and as we get closer to that bus in, we get closer to STN Expo East in North Carolina, that's still some weeks away. And I think folks are hoping that as soon as possible, they can get clarity on a lot of these issues.
Yeah, STN Expo East is like 30 days away, guys. I mean, March 20th through the 25th out in Charlotte, North Carolina. We'd love to see you out there. If you go to stnexpo.com/East, you can check out the agenda. We've got great networking events. Going to that Charlotte Motor Speedway. Got a great ride and drive networking event, technology displays, a lot around safety, a lot around maintenance. We've got operations, leadership. There's just so much to get out of STN Expo. If you can't make that, we also have STN Expo this summer, July 11th through the 16th out in Reno, Nevada. Go to stnexpo.com/West. You can get more info on that. Registration is open. We have our super early bird available, so lock that in. And I know Ryan and I are going to be talking a lot at the conferences about things, especially, immigration policy, which we touched on. There's definitely been a little bit of fear around that. We're trying to temper that with what we see out in communities, but definitely, I know, Ryan, we had a story up on the website about something down in Texas where they were warning that they were going to potentially stop school buses, but then administration stepped in and said, not so fast.
What was the administration that put it out? I mean, it was a Facebook post that I think that was it was trying to warn parents or be proactive, but it ended up causing a big scare. So then the superintendent, they're down at Alice Independent School District, Anisia Trevino, she released a second statement on February 6th that said the previous letter, again, was trying to be proactive, but there had been no reports of U.S. immigration raids on school buses or at school bus stops, and that they had actually been in touch with the U.S. Border Patrol and indicated that school buses and children will not be targeted. Now, of course, that is, what we're hearing from Texas. I know we have our sources like in Florida saying that there's a lot of training going on. Broward County, for example, that's training school bus drivers and teachers and whatnot not to talk to immigration if they show up. What to do. So there's a lot there going on. I know this is what a lot of folks are dealing with. And for example, Denver Public Schools, just before we went to press with this podcast on February 12th, they filed the nation's first lawsuit against the Trump administration, specifically the U.S. Department of Homeland Security and Homeland Secretary Kristi Noem, because of the inordinate amount of time they've been spending on trying to train staff and, find out what's going on and communicate with their parents and their communities and whatnot. So, we might see more lawsuits as well. But it's all, in rolling back that President Obama policy that dates back to 2011 for setting up sensitive locations, essentially, which schools and school bus stops fall under, as well as churches and hospitals and parks and whatnot. But it's not. This is only a policy that's been in effect for 14 years or so. So, but certainly we've seen immigration in those 14 years, and especially over the last several years, really spike. Again, folks are trying to wrap their heads and their hands around all of these issues. So it's definitely an interesting time to be in public education. That's to say the least.
Absolutely. Well, great headlines, Ryan. We got our interview coming up with Joshua Collins and Taylor Ekbatani. Before we get to that, quick message for you. Hey, safety is a number one priority for everyone in school transportation, and even more so when needing to communicate in a school bus setting. School radios, push-to-talk over cellular or POC radios, are the safety enhancement you need to provide clear communication across all aspects of your fleet. Schools, SROs, that's school resource officers, and beyond. School radio helps take safety and connectivity a step further by offering interoperability solutions that bridge conventional two-way radios with POC systems, creating a unified network that boosts effectiveness and safety. This integrated strategy guarantees smooth communication in both emergency situations and daily activities. To learn more about how school radio can improve safety in your communication methods, visit school-radio.com. That's school-radio.com.
Hello, nation. I am back with another exciting guest. We always have exciting guests, so no surprise there. But today we have Joshua Collins. He's the Director of Transportation and Fleet Services for Peoria Public Schools in Illinois. So welcome, Josh. Great to have you on the podcast.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
And if you guys recognize Peoria, it's because it's the home of Dr. Sharon Desmoulin-Kherat. She is one of the 4 finalists for the AASA Super of the Year Award that will be announced next month, but still one of the 4 finalists. I mean, that's super exciting. It's got to be buzzing over there in Peoria.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Especially after the Superintendent of the Year for Illinois and now this, it's a lot of buzz.
Mm-hmm. So tell us a little bit of background on, the district and your superintendent, Dr. Kherat.
So background on us, Peoria Public Schools, we are a district midway between Chicago and St. Louis. We have approximately 13,500 students. We're transporting somewhere around 6,500 students every day. That's a little bit about us. We're a very urban district. Transporting inner city students, 29 buildings, 29 buildings for next year. We're actually expanding buildings to incorporate a new dual language academy that we're opening next year. So a lot of exciting things going on here. As far as the superintendent, she's been superintendent with us for, I believe this is her 10th school year. I was a director 1 year with the previous superintendent, and then most of my time I've spent as director has been with Dr. Kherat. I found that she's been very fantastic to work for. She's motivates. I like to say that she's very relentless in the things that she does and pursues for the children of Peoria Public Schools. And I feel that's something that's necessary. We have a very impoverished district. We have a lot of families with high needs, and there needs to be a powerful person there pushing to ensure that these children are getting access to the education that they need. So that's a little bit about us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I spoke with you guys together on the same call a couple weeks ago. And so stay tuned, Nation. There's going to be an article out on them. If there's not, by the time that you're listening to this, it's just days away. But one thing that really kind of surprised me, I guess, was your guys' relationship and how you were able to lean on each other. And she really understands, the ins and outs of transportation. What is some advice that you would give to other transportation directors who kind of feel siloed by administration or don't really know how to bring up the topic of transportation?
So for me, it was a matter of going back to something that my dad used to tell me when I was little. He used to say, put yourself out there, put yourself out there. And what that meant to me is, even if it's something you don't know or you don't understand, volunteer, get out there and do it. You don't know what you can't do until you can't do it. And you'll be amazed at what you can do. So in any opportunity at the beginning, when she first started with us, if there was something, a difficult task, hey, I can help with that. We started out, we had some wonky grade levels at some of our schools. So we didn't follow a linear for here, K4, 5, 8, 9, 12. We had some really wonky schools were K7, some were K6, some were 7, 8 schools with just 7th and 8th grade. So one of the first tasks was kind of unifying all of that into something that was more cohesive, which was difficult. It was very time consuming, and it wasn't that popular amongst a lot of folks. So it was something that I jumped into and said, hey, we can use our routing software to draw lines on this map, and we can look at new districting. I can run reports off of, how many kids live in this circle, and was able to demonstrate what, routing software can do, what a good logistics team can do. And it kind of started from there, and just kind of put myself on any committee, any meeting, anywhere where I could get in. And just, if nothing, just to listen and learn. What is it that they discuss when they get into these curriculum meetings? What is it that they talk about? What is important to them? That way you can pick up on those things. And then when you have an opportunity, you can jump in and say, hey, I can do that. I can do this. Why are we doing this? Why are we doing that? And it also allows you to support what the administration is wanting, because now you were involved in some of that process. And as I got myself more involved and volunteered to do some more of these things and reports to the board and things like that, you build a trust with administration that they can trust you. And once that trust was established and they saw what we could do, then it became, and at this point now, 10 years now in the future, it's a no-brainer. If something tough comes up, who are they going to go to? They're going to go to their transportation director, because they know we can get that done. So my advice is just get involved and do stuff. Don't do like typical directors do and go, oh, not my lane, and take a setback. Say, no, I know that's difficult. I know that's tough. Maybe I've not done anything like that before, but I'm going to try. I'm going to get out there and see what I can do, because if I can do it and I can show you I can do it, then you're going to trust us more.
Yeah, I love that, because I think a lot of the time it's the conversation of how can administration recognize transportation, but you're almost flipping it and saying like, hey, transportation should get out there and make themselves, a face that the administration sees and can help.
Yes, be an asset. Be a true asset to the district. Don't just get kids to and from school. Don't just meet the minimum expectation. Get out there and do everything you can. Just as an example, we have a vocational program here in Peoria. I'm sure other districts do, but part of that is placing students in the workforce at various locations. Well, we have an auto shop. We have technicians here working on diesel vehicles. We have an auto shop or body shop program in our vocational school. Reached out to the vocational principal, said, hey, I'll take a couple of kids and they can work with our technicians. So since we've opened that, since that initial conversation, we probably had 10 or 15 different students out here working with our technicians in the shop. Whether it's some of the kids learned that this is not what they want to do. Some of the kids fell in love with it and have moved on to, moving on to more college level vocational programming, kind of learn those skills. But it's just finding ways to make yourself valuable to the district, and not just to the district, but to the students? How can we more benefit our students with the things that we do?
I think that needs a pause for a round of applause, because that was worded so wonderfully. I love that. And I think more districts can take that advice and do that. So thank you so much, Josh, for sharing that.
Sure.
And speaking of, being an asset to the district, you guys are running, I think you said 19 bell times when we talked last week or so. So yeah. That's insane.
Yeah, if you look at, we have a traditional 2-bell schedule. So, we have our middle schools and high school are in tier 1 and our primary school are in tier 2. That is not the true picture of what we do. Yes, a majority of our work is that, but we have the vocational school that then is transported between the home high schools and the vocational school throughout the day. We have work sites where we're taking students from one of our special needs schools out to job sites throughout the day. We have different various students with special needs who are being transported between attendance centers. We have students who are on half days for whatever reason who are being transported in or out. We have students that are going between programs. We have programs that may have a traditional bell schedule start time, but they end earlier. We have another program that starts later, but has a tier 2 stop time. Then we have other schools that are not affiliated with our district, special needs schools that we're transporting for. So when I went through and analyzed what, is a bell schedule of here's the start time, here's the end time, how many unique start and end times are we doing? It's 19 different bell schedules that we're balancing throughout the day. And that's not including field trips. So it's a pretty large operation.
That's one of the things that I'm looking at for our March issue is, how districts are handling growth. And what I found is it's not necessarily the growth of students, right? But it's also the growth of the programs that are being offered to these students and how transportation is kind of navigating that. And I think that's a huge piece of transportation that's kind of overlooked sometimes.
I believe so, because, and you're absolutely right, they're just prepping students for college. Peoria tried that when I was in school. I can recall when I was a sophomore and I was looking forward to going into the auto shop because they did the auto shop in your junior and senior year. Well, they got rid of all of that. Everything was focused on college prep. And so many kids got lost because they just weren't college bound. It was not going to happen for whatever reason. It was just not going to happen. And they put all their eggs in one basket. And I think a lot of districts are realizing that we're losing these children, that not college prep doesn't work for everyone. We're not igniting their passions, as Dr. Kherat would say. We're not igniting these kids' passions. Finding out what these kids are passionate about earlier is going to be the difference between a child being successful in life and a child not being successful in life. So the only way you're going to do that is if you start offering more and more and more and more of these smaller programs that may only attract a handful of students. But that's what we have to do. That's our job. We can't just put everybody in the same box and hope that we get most people out. That's not our job. Our job is to put we get everybody out. And that's what we have to do. And if that means adding programs to find these kids' passion, then that's what we have to do. But school districts only have so much space to do that. So these programs inevitably will be placed where you have room or placed where they believe the students will be. So that means we have to have some method in which these students can get from home to these programs or get from one attendance center to the other, or how can these kids access this throughout the day? So I may spend the first 2 or 3 classes at this school and then the next 2 classes at another location and then back for the end of the day, maybe for extracurricular or for sports. And that's where transportation departments come in. It is so vital for the success of these programs that you have a good quality, well-ran transportation department that makes that work. They're the backbone of those. An example for Peoria is just our Woodruff Career and Technical Center, which is our vocational-based school. That could not function without us. Those kids could not get from their home school to that location and back to their home school. Not all of the students. I shouldn't say they couldn't. There are some who can drive themselves. There are lots of students who cannot. That program would not exist without us. There are other programs that we have. An example would be we partnered with Caterpillar, who is here local. They do a lot of their manufacturing still here in Peoria. And one of our high schools partnered with them to create an internship in which students attend manual high school. But the focus is, the curriculum focus is on manufacturing. So in their math class, it's manufacturing based. And then at a part of the day, they leave and they go work at Caterpillar, getting that hands-on experience, earning money while they're doing it, and then transported back at the end of the day. That is another example of a program that just could not exist. And then to watch those students being offered jobs right out of high school, doing what they were doing, and going from students who have said, I didn't know what I was going to do with my life, to where now I'm earning good money, making a living already out of high school, and in some cases helping to support my family. So it's, these things become important to reach all these children, and transportation plays a huge role in making this a success.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, just from your examples, it sounds like, transportation is one of the main factors to help these kids get what they need. And you're doing all of this, right, without a school bus driver shortage. So what is your secret ingredient there? I know the listeners want to know.
Right. For a district our size, it's unusual. When I go to NAPT or other places and you meet other directors, one of the first things you say is, how short are you? We're fully staffed. And I will say that the district made an absolute investment in their drivers. So in the past, we were, a few dollars above minimum wage at times. And it made it difficult to, when you're competing with fast food, or you're competing with other minimum wage style jobs, it's very difficult to recruit, and not just to recruit, but to retain drivers. And we made a conceded effort to invest in our drivers and monitors. It started with a phone call. Our board wanted to move from a 3-tier to a 2-tier schedule that we initiated due to COVID, and they wanted to move back to 2-tier. And we were struggling getting drivers. So I got the phone call, what do you need to make that happen? And I said, I need $20 an hour, and I need a $1,000 sign-on bonus. And we got it. And that goes back to the relationship that I have with the superintendent. She knows that if I tell her this is what I need, she knows that's what we need. She trusts us. And we got it. And that was a mid-contract bump. And then a year and a half later, when we renegotiated the contract, we negotiated a pretty good pay raise for the drivers and got them to $24.50, which has now moved to 25 and some change. And then next year is going to move to 26. And for our area, that's huge. That made us the leader in the area and invested a lot in our driving staff. And immediately the applications picked up. It was immediate. The applications picked up. Our retention is there. We are not losing. So far this year, we've hired 38 drivers and we've lost 10.
Wow.
It used to be in the past, if we hired 38, we lost 38. If we hired 50, we lost 50. And that revolving door stopped. And then the really amazing thing that came out of that was we can do more training. Instead of us just spending all of our time training new staff, we can now take the next step. So our training has improved, and now we found that we can start offering ongoing training and build an even stronger driving staff or in monitors. So in addition to that, the other thing that we did was we partnered with an ad agency or an advertising agency. It was just becoming more and more difficult to try to do all of the things you do in transportation, even with the staff that I have, and monitor all of this advertising, making sure that we're on the radio, making sure that we're developing new ads. We partnered with an agency. I'll give them a plug, 309 Marketing, and they handle it. We pay them, and they're the ones that are out there making sure we're on social media, updating things, running things, where we periodically record new ads, and they're the creative force behind it. And we just basically sit back and let them run it. And those two things together have been tremendous in our success at recruiting people and getting our message out.
That's awesome. And I know when we talked earlier, you said your wife actually works as the director of transportation at a nearby district. So when she heard about the increase in pay, she was, kind of between a rock and a hard place, right? Because now she's a nearby district. Like, how are they going to compete with you guys?
Correct. And they initially based their initial push to 20 based on what Peoria Public Schools had done. And now we've raised the bar yet again. And yes, I hear about it a lot at home. It's I'm like, hey, just tell them we're at now. No, we don't want to talk about that.
Let's give her a shout out. It's almost Valentine's Day tomorrow. What's your wife's name?
Zaskia Collins.
Awesome. So looking at, the school bus driver shortage, there's always the debate, right? Is it culture? Is it pay? What have you guys found then, that it's more pay?
Everybody works a job for a paycheck. Some of us get to get a paycheck and do things we love. Some of us get a paycheck. School bus drivers love what they do. They are, regardless of what they say or may say, or school bus drivers love what they do. They love children. Most days. There are some days, maybe not, but most days they love children. And when I ask my folks, or I start to talk about my folks, or with my folks about certain things, they all have the same thing. They love the children. The children is what gets them here. Now, when you couple that with an actual, where it goes from just a job to a career now, where you have folks who, because we don't limit the hours that our employees can get. There's just too much work. So we have employees that are getting 8+ hours a day. So this is now moved from the realm of just a job to a career. Now our folks are earning a living that doesn't require them to maybe have a second job, or what do I do during the summer? And they get to be around children. And that, again, it makes for a culture in which you can retain folks and can cultivate that culture of safety, because you're not just spending all of your time teaching the new folks, and then the folks that are there just learn on their own, per se. So it's a mixture of both. You need the money there to attract people in, but when they come in and you have good people, you need that culture there to keep them.
Yeah, and I thought that was a good point that you made earlier about, not focusing all the training now on new hires, and now you can expand your training, which does increase safety for the students. So I thought that was a great point.
Yes, it's very valuable. You can't do enough training. I jump on anything that we can get, and try to keep our folks interested and give them options, during breaks and stuff. It's not uncommon for us to give them options. We'll offer 2 or 3 different voluntary trainings, and even voluntary, they fill up quickly. Folks will, if we say we've got room for 10, 20 will sign up. So, it's not just that we're offering it, it's that they want it. When you start offering it, you'll find that your folks will want it. And the more you give them, the more they want.
Awesome, Josh. Well, thank you so much. Before we wrap up, can you tell the listeners a little bit about you, how you got started in the industry? I know, your background wasn't necessarily transportation, but like a lot of people, you fell into the glorious role.
Yep. So in a previous life, I was involved. I wanted to be a mechanic. I had an older brother who was a mechanic. I thought that was awesome. I love tools. I like working on cars. I thought that's what I wanted to do. Went to school for that. Decided, no, that's not actually what I wanted to do. And I wound up back at a family business. My father owned a bicycle shop. So I wound up doing that. And I initially went back just for a short amount of time and ended up being there like 10 or 12 years working in the family business. Well, unfortunately, that didn't last, and we ended up closing the doors and found myself kind of in between, what do I do? And I started working for Peoria Public Schools as a monitor just to help supplement income while I was looking for a career. And just so happened that they had a large number of retirements out of the office. So I applied for one of the supervisor's positions and was hired into the office and was the special needs supervisor. So walking in from no experience to that role was a crash course in learning, but it's exciting. There's no 2 days are the same. So I found myself just getting immersed in the work. And after 4 years, the director left and recommended me for the director position, and then assumed that role, and then have just continued to learn and do what I can, to try to make things better for the employees and for the children.
Yeah. So you've been, I think, 11 years director?
This is my 11th school year, yes, and then 4 years as the special needs supervisor, and then a year as a monitor. I've been here 16 years.
Wow, that's awesome. Well, thank you so much for all you do, Josh, and for, the students and for transportation. And thank you for jumping on this podcast and sharing your knowledge.
Well, thank you for having me. I appreciate everything you guys do, bringing awareness to the work that we do and why it's important. And we appreciate that.
A special thanks to Taylor, Ryan, Joshua for joining us on the episode this week. We appreciate our sponsors as well, TransFinder and School Radio. Guys, don't forget, visit stnonline.com for all the latest news and analysis on the school transportation industry. We got STN Expo East. Remember, coming up real soon, March 20th through the 25th. Go lock in, come out, register today. You still have time. Also, if you can't make it, we have STN Expo West this summer, Reno, Nevada, July 11th through the 16th. stnexpo.com/west for details. Don't forget, subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you listen to Pods Nation. We're here every week for you, touching on the latest headlines happening in school transportation. We love you. We'll see you next week.